Michael Hayden, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
I'm not Doug Blackmon, but I occasionally play him on TV. A lot of hands up, and we're going to get to everybody, so just cool your jets. But I get to ask the first question since I have to play Doug Blackmon, so I hope that's all right. That was a terrific presentation, and we're going to have a great discussion, I think, about so many issues about the past and also about the future. You mentioned drones. You mentioned, we didn't talk about Russia in your conversation, but I'm sure that will be on everybody's minds. I also was so interested to hear that you are against the idea of administrations launching special investigations into the previous administration, or indeed even into their defeated political opponents, which I gather has been suggested by at least one candidate in our current election. But at the beginning of the talk with Doug, you copped to a couple of big mistakes. The 2002 WMD, NIE, and the lack of a plan for Iraq. And I thought that was very candid and frank to say we just got those things wrong. So here's a nice juicy softball. In the past 15 years, without getting into too many details, what did you get right?
Yeah, actually, we remember we're going this way and we got to go do this way, and we are arguing about the legal and ethical impacts of going this way. Operationally, we're going this way really well. All right, we have taken the fight to those who would will us harm. Yeah. And we simply have destroyed Al-Qaeda as it used to be. Now, I got it. We got the resurrection of ISIS, and this is not going away. But the dangers to this country of a 9/11 style attack are now very, very low, and we have forced the enemy into an approach that is obviously bad, but it's not nearly the national tragedy that 9/11
And is
was.
that the result of a accumulated series of small operations along the way, a constellation, or do you put it to a culture change? What are the key ingredients of that
This
success
is an
story?
intelligence-driven war, all right? In the Cold War, remember the Soviets and all that, and Checkpoint Charlie and so on? My job was to find out where Group Soviet Forces Germany was, all right? That's pretty easy, all right? That's an echelon tank army in Eastern Europe, all right? Easy to find, hard to stop. This enemy is easy to stop. He's just hard to find. This is an intelligence-driven war. If I can tell the operator it's him, game over, all right? And therefore, it's kind of a little self-congratulatory for my old community, but we have gotten very, very good at this. Now look, things still happen. And here's something I will share with you. Things will continue to happen. All right? There are things beyond the ability of any intelligence organization to stop without fundamentally changing your DNA as a society. And so we just aren't going there. All right? But we have become quite good. I need to add though, because in your heart, but we got all this killing going on now, and AQ is weak, but ISIS is strong. What's going on? And when American GIs think about conflict, we think about close fight and deep fight, all right? The close fight in this one is dealing with people who are already convinced to come kill us. The deep fight is the production rate of people who want to come kill us in 3, 5, or 10 years. Magnificent here, really late to need here. And this is going to be really, really hard. We had the same problem in the Cold War. Hold it, fold it, make sure the Sovs can't expand. Beaver away at their ideological attraction. This system's awful. It can't survive. All right? We could complain about communism because it's us. Communism is a Western philosophy. It's written by a German in London, for God's sake. All right? And so when you and I take up arms, literally, figuratively, against communism and say that's a bad system, we got cred. We got authenticity. The deep fight in this war is about a religion that is fundamentally not our own. I get it, we're multicultural, we're about 3 million Muslims living here, but fundamentally we're Judeo-Christian in our background, and African and European in our heritage. I mean, for me to go to a Muslim and saying, I really do think you're misinterpreting the words of the prophet here. I mean, that just turns to dust as I say it. And so our problem is, although we've been very successful in the close fight, The deep fight, the ideological fight here, is largely beyond our means. And we are dependent on others within this great monotheism to solve some of the crises that are going on. To put it in another way, we're collateral damage. In many ways, we're not the target. This is a civil war within a great monotheism. And what happens to us is spillage from that conflict. We've got a right to defend ourselves. We've got a right to degrade those who would come do us harm. But this fight over here is the long-term one. And that's why if we could kill our way out of this, we'd have been done 14 years ago.
How much time do you spend on that deep fight, that's the intelligence agencies, rather than simply
we
building?
can frame it. We can frame it. But the tools we have to affect it are very limited. Let me be modestly political here. It doesn't help our thinking about the deep fight to pretend this doesn't have anything to do with Islam. This does have something to do with Islam. Let me quickly add, it is, for God's sake, not about all of Islam and certainly not about all Muslims. But there is a struggle. This is easy to say on a college campus, all right? There is a struggle going on within Islam that mirrors Christendom's struggle in the 17th century, in the 30 years war in Europe. How do you reconcile transcendental faith with scientific reason? Okay? And our great compromise was, I get it. Theology over here, the coercive power of the state over here. Secular things in that corner, sacred things in this corner. It remains to be seen if this other monotheism decides that is its resolution, but that is its debate. And oh, by the way, ours was as violent as theirs. The only thing they have that we didn't is social media. And so you get to see it. But it was just as bad. 1/3 of the German-speaking population of Europe died in the 30 Years' War. And so that, back to my, what I would tell Madam President, tectonic. Not just about grabbing this guy out of Raqqa.
As I told you beforehand that I would ask you this question, what is the health of the clandestine service, the human source gathering entity? Because a lot of what you said means that they got to be awfully good and they got to be awfully well schooled in Arabic, et cetera.
Right. So Fred, what's happened is that, and I did this, all right? So it's not a criticism of John or the other, or Leon or others. I mean, I did this too, not just these guys. We have become consumed with everything we just talked about, all right? Dave Petraeus came to visit me at the house before he was going for his confirmation hearing. And Dave and Holly came and, you know, coffee cake in the kitchen. Dave's writing everything down. He talked to all living former directors before he went to his confirmation hearing. And as we're walking out, I do that classic Washington pull aside, you know, David, one more thing. And I let the ladies go out onto the porch. And I said, David, one more thing. CIA has never looked more like OSS than it does right now. All right? That's the Office of Strategic Services, Direct Action Arm in World War II. David, that's good. America's safer because of it. We're actually pretty good at this. But you got to realize, David, we're not OSS. We are the nation's global espionage service. And unless you're able to remind yourself, and more importantly, the institution, that it's got this broader responsibility, it's going to be consumed with this. Fred, you'll appreciate this, all right? Most of what we now call analysis, and that's probably a lot of what we now call analysis in the American intelligence community, is targeting. It's targeting for action, go get him. Targeting for collection, I want to learn more. Or targeting to make sure he doesn't get on an airplane. But it's all about disambiguation. See which way my hands are going? All right, it's going down into the very, very specific, and we're exquisite at it. We really are. What I fear, Fred, is we don't go this way. Okay, and then we miss the broader field of view. We have a generation of case officers. We send them to the farm, they graduate, we send them to the war, and they've been really good. They've been really good. But then they come back to a routine assignment. All right, and the first question they ask in some European capital is, where's my weapon? Where's my Kevlar? Because their life experience of creating intelligence has been in war zones. And so I think John Brennan, the current director, John recognizes this, and he's trying to reestablish more traditional tradecraft throughout a workforce that is very young and largely experienced by the counterterrorism fight rather than the broader missions.
I have a question about the WikiLeaks documents. Suppose we are morally certain that it's Russian people at work, high level. A. B, they really do want to influence our election. They pick somebody they would prefer. Suppose that's where we are. Are we, this is kind of at your edge. Right now, we're sitting there saying every day we get new docs. Are we really powerless to stop it? Suppose those two facts are true. Russia's doing it, they're trying to change our election. No weapons?
Number one, Russia is doing it. All right, Russia is doing it. All right, I don't think anybody who knows how to point to Russia on a map would challenge the. Well, I know one guy who challenges it. All right, but that's. Okay. And I was quite heartened that our government actually said so last Friday. All right, you had people, our old tribe, Fred, out there kind of implying it, but they clearly didn't have the political top cover to say, yeah, it's the Russians. We said it was the Russians. Okay. I don't think they're trying to pick a winner. I think they're just messing with your heads and mine. All right? They think we do this all the time to them. Putin's trying to say, hey, see, I can do this too. So I think he just kind of takes a certain joy in this. So A, the Russians are doing it. B, they're not picking a winner. They're just trying to degrade our confidence in our political processes. C, I don't think they're doctoring the data. Okay? I actually think what you see is what was actually written. I think if I'm doing this from the other side, changing it puts the whole project at risk. It's bad enough for the effects I want, good enough for the effects I want to create without changing it. So I would just, so my instinct is they're not fooling with it. That's exactly what was said, all right? Because it doesn't make sense for them to try to change it when it's, as I said, it's good enough as it is to cause the effect you want to create. The last thing is, let me ask you, and I actually talked about this with a bunch of much smarter people on the topic. Let me ask you to not think of this as a cyber problem. Do not even think of this as an electoral problem. Think of this as a Russia problem. And put it in the box marked Russia with all the other things that Russia is doing that, frankly, from my point of view, should make us all very unhappy. That then allows you to respond in the Russian box rather than in the cyber box or the electoral box. It allows you to respond in other ways where you begin to, no, you can't stop it, all right? But you can dissuade them from doing it because you're giving consequences to their actions. So I'm making this up, all right? It's not a policy recommendation, but it's of a type. You know, what if Monday President Obama reverses his position with regard to providing defensive arms to the Ukrainian military? That gets attention in Moscow. And you can quietly point out that, you see how, you're asking me how I would think about it and deal with it. That's my approach.
Larry Page, the co-founder of Google, said recently that by 2030, physicians' diagnoses will be done largely by computer. NSA's technology is world-renowned. But what role, we are constantly bombarded with what's going to happen to us in the civilian sector. What role is technology playing in the future NSA from where you sit, I say, 2 decades out?
Sure. So this is back to another one of those tectonics, all right? This is just fundamentally changing it is, all right? It is fundamentally changing our understanding of what constitutes privacy. All right, that line is changing. And let me give you a thought that I really believe in, but may not be happy. Mark Zuckerberg is going to have more influence on where the new line is than any president or Congress of the United States. That's just tectonics, all right? I mean, head of Facebook, his definition of privacy is going to make more of a difference to your life than anything Congress says or does, all right? With regard to NSA, so I became director in '99. And that's kind of the knee in the curve where you and I started putting stuff we used to keep in our safe and decided we could put it in our telephone, okay? We knew at NSA that this would be the golden age of electronic surveillance. If we could do this half well, there's going to be so much stuff out there available for us to steal that would have been so much more difficult for us to steal had it been kept in a physical characteristic. All right, now I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about legitimate foreign intelligence targets. All right, please. But I'm trying to be very candid. That's what we do. We steal stuff. All right, and we're really good. In fact, I think BCS has us #1 for the last 6 years. All right.
We steal stuff? Is that
We
the
do.
official motto?
We do.
Is that-
Yeah.
But it's in Latin.
Actually, that's how we talk amongst ourselves. I mean, you can't sugarcoat this. No, we self-limit, all right, by law and policy. We steal stuff to keep you free and keep you safe. We do not allow ourselves to steal stuff to make you rich. A lot of other countries don't subscribe to Corollary 3. They do steal stuff for industrial advantage. We do not. It is all about security when we conduct electronic surveillance. But what's happened is we have put the world, our species, not you and me, our species now has opted for the convenience and the scale of digital communications that so much more is retrievable by surveillance activities like NSA or GCHQ or the Russian FSB and so on. And so this last 10 or 15 years has been the golden age of surveillance. Sorry, this is a long answer, but I think it's an important distinction. The world's now getting smart. The world's saying, well, I really do like putting the stuff, I do like banking from my phone while I'm on the metro. All right, that's really cool. And I want to continue to do that. But I really don't want anybody stealing my PIN number. And so now what you're seeing is a move to make it more safe to do that stuff in the digital. Remember the grand debate over encryption? Apple, San Bernardino, the FBI director, Tim Cook, and all that? That's what's going on. And so this golden age of surveillance, I think, is beginning to darken a bit as people now get a lot more careful about how it is they put stuff in the digital domain. So you see this kind of ebb and flow that's going forward. I can't predict where it gets to in 20 or 30 years. It's just so difficult. I will say this, all right? And this is pulling us back to the Apple dispute in San Bernardino, and remember the iPhone and so on. Yeah. I don't think it matters what an American court says or what the American Congress does with regard to legislation. It is just going to be more difficult for any intelligence activity to extract content of communications because the global arc is for better and better encryption, and that's going to happen irregardless of American court or legislative action.
You haven't mentioned China in the hour, and I just have to ask you, because it may be a question others wanted to pose. The Russians are making a lot of headlines in irritating us on cyber. The Chinese are doing it too, but they're not making as many headlines. Is that a fair statement?
Actually, the Chinese were grabbing all the headlines until about a year or two ago. And it was because of Chinese scale, not skill, but scale. And it was kind of unrestricted submarine warfare on American intellectual property. Yeah. And they do steal for profit. Yeah. All right, that's most of what they do. But now the Russians are making noise. 13 months ago, Xi Jinping was here, the Chinese president. And he actually agreed to the American definition of legitimate state espionage. He actually said, using the organs of the state to steal commercial information for commercial purposes was not legitimate. That's the American view of where the line is between legitimate espionage and illegitimate. And Xi, I was surprised, he signed up. There has been a change in Chinese behavior. Mm-hmm. All right, I mean, we're not to the promised land yet, but the Chinese have been less aggressive, less at scale in doing what they're doing. So there may actually have been a change in Chinese policy to kind of tighten it up. And I'll give you another thought. One of the arguments we try to make with the Chinese is, you're going to have intellectual property too. All right? You may not want to license a global regime that is based upon absolute piracy, that you may actually want global norms in which that which you will soon have, intellectual property, you will want to protect. So it might actually be a byproduct of changes in the Chinese economy, where it's actually disadvantageous for them to sponsor a global regime in which theft is not just permitted, but almost encouraged.
Could we go back for a moment to the drones. There's this absolute certainty that we're being very, very careful and very, very targeted. And some guy in Arizona watches them for a week with his family and says,
Utah.
they're certain. And then he's walking to the grocery and we pop them. That's one person, but he didn't get a chance to surrender. He didn't get a chance to explain his actions or his motives. I know it's a lot of ethics
No.
involved, but
Have you seen Eye in the Sky?
no, I've not.
Go ahead. It's on Netflix. Go ahead. We have a 90 minutes. It's not that long a movie. It's a wonderful film. It's kind of anchored on a British decision process, but the Americans are talking to are actually flying the drones in Utah. All right. I'm sorry, Nevada. It fudges around the edges in terms of the exact operational rhythm. All right. But in terms of the operational, legal, and moral questions that it raises, it's magnificent. And I highly recommend that you look at it. Yeah, it's hard, all right? And it's really hard on the drone operators, all right? Because, because they do 12 hours on shift, and then their husband or wife complains they forgot to pick up the milk on the way home, and didn't you know you were supposed to pick up the soccer carpool? So you've got this, I'm in combat for 12 hours, and now I'm back into this other environment. And it's really hard for them to go back and forth. Beyond that, this is not a video game to them. There may be detachment at the highest political level because you're not putting Americans at risk. You don't have to go to Dover, all right, ever, because of drone operations, right? The Americans are not going to die, all right? But you can commit American
Unless
power.
American is the target.
Well, okay, we'll get, but you don't go to Dover to meet him.
No, that's for sure.
All right. But what you've got is you've got the drone operator who's there over the compound, all right? And you've got an omniscient, God's eye, unblinking stare at this compound. And so you're looking at this one individual whom you're confident is willing us harm, is part of an opposing armed enemy force, all right? And you're watching him play with his kids, and you're watching him talk to his spouse, and you're waiting for him to get into that white SUV and to get at least 200 meters away from the compound so that your Hellfire doesn't have any stray fragments that harm the family. And you watch it for the duration. You may watch that for 6, 7, 8, 12, 15, 24 hours. And then he gets in the SUV and he drives off, and then you kill him. Right? That is a deep emotional strain on the human beings we collectively have asked to do this on behalf of our defense. Now that's an emotional strain. Morally, you can probably tell I'm very comfortable with this. This is part of an opposing armed enemy force, and it is the most precise application of combat power in the history of armed conflict. It really is. And that's not saying it's zero in terms of collateral damage. But when you can, I've been in the room, all right? We've made decisions. Bad man, we know it. They're in the guest house. Is the family in the family quarters? Yes, sir, they are. All right. What weapon do you want to use? I want to use a GBU, 500-pound bomb. Show me, and we actually call it, show me the bug splat from a GBU. It is a red, yellow, green thing, and because it's not symmetrical, it does look like something hit your windshield, all right? We call it a bug splat. Show me the bug splat. And you can see red, anybody in there is dead. Yellow, maybe. Green, they're okay. So you lay the bug splat on the target, which is the guest house, and you go, oh, that's too high probability you're going to hurt the family. Show me this with a Hellfire, smaller weapon, 10-pound warhead, not 500. And it's not coming this way, it can come that way. It's a missile. So you can direct its energy in a different direction. I'm pulling you through an operational model, but I just want you and everyone to understand how carefully this is done. So you say, all right, show me the Hellfire coming in from the northeast, where the energy then goes away from the compound. All right? And you say, yeah, I like that one. That's good. All right? What's the PK on the bad guys with the Hellfire from the northeast? What's the probability of kill? And you get this. If they're all in the same room, we'll get them all. but these things have internal walls that are really thick. It's not sure. So I actually begin the chapter in the book on targeted killings with this dialogue. And what happens in the book, and it reflects what actually happens in real life, is that he goes through this, show me the GBU bug splat, show me the Hellfire bug splat. I like the Hellfire bug splat, use the Hellfire. And then the guy gets out of the room and runs down to the operational center and says, go ahead, you're clear to use the Hellfire. And then the guy making the decision in the book says, tell me about these guys again, the targets. And he goes through who these guys are. And they're really bad, and they're really dangerous, and they're really hard to find. And in the narrative, the man making the decision says, use the GBU. And another guy gets up in the room and runs down, and they use the GBU. In the narrative in the book, about 75 minutes later, the decision maker is briefed on what happened. He said, we used the GBU. The family was shaken up but not hurt. They ran out of the compound right away. And so in this case, it was a happy outcome. In another case, we were going after a guy named Abu Khabab al-Masri, who was the WMD chief for al-Qaeda. He was along the Afghan-Pakistan border. It was a summer night. It was July or August 2008. And they sleep outside in the summer because it's so hot. And he was sleeping with family members, including a grandson, who was X number of feet away from him. And the decision maker had to make a decision as to do you or do you not take the shot. This was a guy who was really hard to find. He was really dangerous, and we had many people at risk trying to find him. And so the decision was made to use the Hellfire, coming in from a direction that pushed the energy away from the family members and in the direction of Abu Khabab and his known entourage. And so the shot was taken. The grandson was unfortunately killed. Okay? And that's the kind of decisions people make on your behalf every day. They're not immoral, they're hard. Right? They are not insensitive, they really are. But that's the task.
Folks, I'm looking at the clock. It's well past the hour. I don't want to cut off your opportunity to ask a few questions, but I'm going to bring the formal Q&A to a close. I want to thank General Hayden for such an honest presentation here today. Thank you.